Welcome everyone to the bar tonight. We are talking with Dr. Ethan Coghill. Everything from karate to jiu-jitsu to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Let's go. Ethan, what's in the glass?
Old fashioned. I know you did it last week, but I had to send a note to you. You're the guy that got me into the old fashioned game, the bourbon, which granted you set the bar high. So now I go to a lot of places, get disappointed or not. But tonight got the old fashioned with a little bit of Jefferson's.
Brother, great play. Here's the thing. So I am having what I will call the Coghill White Russian. So we made our TikTok video, good ode to one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yes.
But the difference is this tastes a lot different. This is not what the dude would drink. So take me through. So as an ode to Dr. Coghill, what is in the drink I'm drinking?
I got to admit, it's a little far off. So in that you have right there is almond milk, still got the Kahlua, and then we do a white spiced rum. When originally a White Russian should be like a half and half, heavy cream, vodka, and Kahlua. So we got 1/3 of the ingredients right. So
yeah, the play that's different, if you've never had a real White Russian, the difference that the Big Lebowski fans would enjoy is definitely thicker, creamier. Not this. You do taste that spice at the end. I didn't know what that was because I actually didn't look at this on purpose to see if I could guess. But I'm glad you just told me because that's why it's thinner. It's the almond milk. It's the almond milk.
Yes. Yeah, our household dairy free, so we can't have that. We can't have that.
Makes sense, but you can still enjoy a good drink.
That's right.
It grows on you. The spice is a little better the more you get. Every show we do a cheers to charity. And I want you to run down the charity that you've been kind enough to donate to tonight.
Yeah, for sure. Super excited about this. This is kind of a young charity. So it's a veteran-owned, non-for-profit charity that's a scholarship opportunity. So what they do is they get sponsors throughout the Middle Tennessee state of Jiu-Jitsu academies to help serve single-parent homes to just underprivileged kids that want to get into Jiu-Jitsu but just maybe don't have the funds to make it work. So they go through, they verify these gyms, and they give kids the opportunity to really help impact their lives through helping fund their memberships to the gym. So super excited. Give Reggie and those guys a shout out. Really hope everyone could donate to them and get that thing going off the ground.
The name of the charity is Embrace Process. And
yes, sorry.
Sponsor of the show tonight, Active Spine and Joint Center, will be matching that donation. Active Spine and Joint Center is the premier rehab solution for any pain complaint, muscle, joint, nerve, tendon in Sumner County. And Dr. Coghill, you actually are on the screen right now breaking down an MRI in the video, which is incredibly awesome and so honored to have you. Something great about Dr. Coghill is from early on meeting him, it was very, very clear that guy has more empathy and love for people in his pinky finger than about 10 other men combined. So absolutely honored to have you on the team. And tonight, I'm extremely excited to talk about a dual passion that we both have, which is the martial arts. Now, we've actually never deep dove this conversation. And what I think is great about that is that it's almost like this became a little too perfect. I've thrown a little away just to have some fun, but we have plenty to get through on this entire journey. And where I would love for you to start is just take us through your journey through martial arts, because you have experienced different styles. And a lot of times, someone like myself, the art form that they began with is exactly where they finished or have a lifelong passion. So I would love to hear your story through that. Just let's get started.
Yeah, it's kind of a long one. It actually doesn't even start at the center with martial arts. So it really falls back to my original passion of football. Like, man, growing up from the time I can remember, all I could live, dream, think about was football. So it got to about my freshman year of high school. And at that point in time, I had just quit my other two really big sports, basketball and baseball. And I was like, man, I'm going all in. Football this, football everything, football during the season, in the off season. I just want to just work out. So I was doing that in the off season, lifting hard and everything like that. And this is going to be fun. But for those who don't know, I'm from Santa Claus, Indiana. In Santa Claus, Indiana, literally, it's Holiday World and it's cornfields. So there's just nothing there. I mean, it's just it's a small town, small high school. So, one day at the lunch table, you just hear like, hey, did you know that a UFC fighter moved to the city? And you're just like, and this was around 2008, 2009. So UFC was just starting to get big. This is just after Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner had their big duel, blowing it up. So just day by day, week by week, you just heard like, oh, did you hear UFC fighter? And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? And then slowly but surely you'd have some kids go and try it out. And then you would just find them, run to them in the hallway and be like, hey, I heard you went and trained with that UFC guy. How'd it go? And then they would tell you like, oh my God, it was so hard. Oh my God, it was this. And then slowly but surely you had these people kind of dropping like flies. So I was like, huh. So just started watching UFC a little more. And then I had one of my good friends go over there who was really big into football at the time. And he's like, dude, you got to come over here. It's more than just martial arts training. He's going to kick your butt. There's a really good workout. It'd be great for you. So I'm like, okay. Now this time I couldn't even drive. So tell my dad about it. My dad watched UFC. So he's one that also kind of got me into it. And he drives me over there. We pull up into the gym. It's kind of dark. We walk into just 7 of these burly, just blue collar guys tatted up. And what you don't know is the guy who runs that, Dan Christensen, he's a 6'7" heavyweight. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And literally nicest guy you can meet. So I could tell my dad's a little like, hey, I'm about to hand my son over to all these guys. It's what the heck's going to happen? So first class, go in there. And exactly what he had told me. It's literally the first hour. It's just a HIIT training class where flipping tires, dragging sleds, doing pull-ups, box jumps, Turkish get-ups. And then the last hour, because that was his whole plan, like wear you the heck out, was going over all the martial arts that he was into. The Muay Thai, wrestling, Jiu-Jitsu, all that stuff. So what it really started out is just like, hey, I just want to do something off season, get my butt kicked, slowly transformed over the next 2 years of really falling in love with the martial art and just all that entails with that. So
I see Alan Bigbird joined the chat, and he has a martial arts background too. Alan, drop what style of martial arts were you in? That'd be a good see if there's some tie-ins there. So your story is very interesting because when you started wanting to get a good workout, joined a gym where someone was already well-versed in multiple art styles, and to put timeline in to age myself pretty good. So that was 08, you said?
Yeah, it was probably around that time. 08, 09, I think.
So you started around 08. My story backs up a little bit further to when I was 5, like literally 5. But I was riding home from my grandfather's on a bike, and I lived maybe 5 houses away. And I was riding by, and there were a couple of kids that I think most would reference as turds. But as I'm coming by, this kid, 3 days in a row, would just push me off my bike. So I would cry all the way home, but I still never thought anything about it. Like, I still remember that, but I never was that upset about it. But my mom was pissed about it. So mom, the second or third time, just storms out the door with me. We walk down there, and I'm like 5, so I don't really care, but I just know something's about to happen. Like, when mom comes at me like this, I really screwed up, So we're blitzing down there, and she just goes off on these kids. So they never did it again, but as soon as we came home, she was talking to my grandfather, my grandmother, and my cousins lived with them at the time, and said, look, we've got to sign these kids up for karate because this can't be a thing. They have to be able to stand up for themselves. I don't care if that kid's 3 years older, because he was maybe 8 years old, but he felt like he was 20 when you're 5. So anyway, that went down, and we started at David Deaton here in Hendersonville. And the lead instructor at the time was a guy named Keith Jones. And Keith Jones instantly, so I had my father figures in my life. I had my dad, I had my stepdad, but they're a direct family. And so Keith was the very first person that was that mentor person you look up to that you don't want to disappoint, that isn't in your family. So there's this other, it's like that first teacher, if that makes sense. But it was like, if I did something wrong, I knew mom would spank me because I messed up. Like, get in your room, you're in trouble. Dad would take away the Nintendo. That would be his play. Yeah. But Mr. Jones would be disappointed, and that would wreck me. So having that piece was very instrumental for me. And so it started that route, but I started with Wateroo. And so we'll talk later about the different styles, but that's Wateroo. And that's what I stuck with all the way through. So Keith eventually went on his own, opened his own studio. And because the connection was strong so quickly between my family, so me and my two cousins and him, we knew no matter what, that's where we were going. The other instructors were fine, but there was just something different about that connection with any great instructor. So we followed him through thick and thin, and amazing lessons learned along that route. And I can't wait to get through more of those with you. You've also,
yeah, I love that. Can I just say that on this? It was the same thing for me. Dan was that person in my life, just those formidable, like 15, 16-year-old years where obviously love and respect to my dad, but just to have that guy that you looked up to. And he was the same exact way, just super into philosophy, always trying to just keep me out of my head and just try to teach me things about life. It was so much more than martial arts. And that is probably why I'm still doing it to this day, is because he's had such an impact on me, and he's still someone I keep up with. So know exactly what you're saying. That's why I really am passionate about what those guys that embrace process are doing, because it's like, I had a pretty good home life. So for any kid's life that they can change and kind of get that mentorship that they might not have in their lives into their life is, I think, super impactful. And it's like, they can change one kid's life. It's worth it. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's where that relationship is a lot different with the martial arts, because it's so much more one-on-one than a lot of sports. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to, there's a ton of value in team sports, but there is that special connection that happens in the martial arts. And especially if now you're in some way in a fighting form or a joint lock form where you're doing holds and you're aggressively going at each other together and getting that mentality and that mindset and that workout as a group, which I think is pretty awesome. When you started out, you also have moved. So when you moved to grad school, so you went to Logan, you were able to keep practicing. So this is something that I have not been able to experience. So you started martial arts, moved to a different region, continued practicing, but then now we're fortunate to have you in Nashville and you're also practicing. What's that been like? What's that journey been like from that initial process to I'm joining maybe a completely different outlook perspective on the same sport, maybe in a different state? What's that been like?
Yeah, I love this question because it's something near and dear to my heart, because how passionate I was with Dan and to have him as such a mentor, it's been hard jumping around. So from there, I went to Western Kentucky, very fortunate to find a coach there, Josh Johnson, really great guy in Bowling Green. And for 4 years, man, I just laughed because in college, schedules are a lot easier, so I was training a crap ton. I went to college and I was training hard on, 3, 4, 5 days a week. So I was lucky enough to have a pretty solid coach, pretty solid team there. Then from there in Bowling Green, after that went to St. Louis to start chiropractic school. And then from there it was it was hard. I got to admit, jumped around to a few gyms, and it's just one of those things. I'd been in it for a while, so I kind of knew what I was looking for, but you would go to a place that it just didn't give you the feels, just didn't set right with you. So you'd have to jump around. But then it always, like, in the back of my head was like, man, I don't want to be that guy that's jumping around and maybe getting a bad name per se, because we are kind of a small community. So I don't want to feel like, oh, that guy came to my gym and then left. Oh, that guy. And it's like, so there for a while, it got hard to not find it. And then somehow, some way, I was able to find this small group of guys in St. Louis that literally trained in this guy's basement. So didn't have to pay any fees or anything. We literally showed up at this guy's house a couple days a week, turned on loud music, trained hard in his basement. Really became good friends with those people. Did a little bit of cross training about an hour away with another group of people. So I had a pretty good setup by my time was done in St. Louis. So once again, I had to pack up and then come to Hendersonville. And it was kind of the same thing where it's like, man, I jumped around to a few gyms, really hated that feeling. I've always been kind of chasing that day in kind of mentor feeling this whole time. But here I am now settled in, got training with the guys over at Nashville MMA, great group of guys, work hard. And then I got another gym in Millersville at the Academy, which is also really good. So it's been hard, but this has also driven a love for me to anywhere I go. I love to find a jiu-jitsu gym there and go there and train. Just, we call it dropping in. So I love to go and just test out the different environments. Everyone's super cool. Like, that's what I love about the jiu-jitsu community. It's like, hey, literally I can't go and drop in anywhere. Everyone's always there. Big smile. Like, hey, yeah, come train hard. As long as you respect them, they're going to respect you. So it's always exciting for me to try out these different gyms. But I just kind of laugh because my wife gets so mad at me. Like, the first thing I'm doing when she's like, hey, we're going to be in blah, 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 is I'm looking up a place to train. And I'm like, hey, if you give me 2 hours, I can go over here. So she's always getting mad at me like, no, you don't need to train if we go there. So it's fun.
All right. So let's talk through this a little bit for the listeners that may not be as familiar with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because it's actually, other than the science side of it, I'm actually not as familiar either. So when I got into martial arts, the first time I heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was after my second degree black belt test. There was someone testing for their first degree black belt. And we were just talking after, because it was a long, long day. I mean, a grueling day. You're just beat to death after doing everything, every form, every type of fighting, every type of throw, everything that you could possibly do that you've learned up to that point. You're basically putting on a show and going at it with your other colleagues that are testing. One of the things that was very interesting is that my mindset the whole time was, well, Wado-Ryu is how I'm trained. That's what I do. That's what I do forever. Like, there was just never this question of, oh, I could switch martial arts. Like, that might be something you do. But this one person in the class said, yeah, after I get my black belt, I'm going to start at this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class that just opened. I can't remember what it was somewhere in Nashville, downtown. And this would have been 01, maybe 2001. I mean, this had to be pretty early. But sure. He was extremely excited about it. And he brought it up, and I was like, so you just start all over? Like, you're back to a white belt? Like, after all this, after 10 years of doing this, you're out? And
it hurt.
It was just such a unique moment to think, man, we've worked our ass off to get here, and you're out. Like, you're going to start all over again doing something else. So at first it was almost this like prideful territorial thing. Like, who is this guy? Get him out of here. But then it sunk in a couple days later, just the intrigue of like, what would training in another art form be like? And so I've always been interested in that, but that was literally the first time I'd ever heard of it. What would you describe Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the average individual that's just hearing about it, or maybe thinking about looking at the different arts for their kids? We'll get into the details on that later, but take me through, how would you define it, or what would be a good example?
I would say that the closest thing that it looks like is wrestling. Like wrestling in, grade school, middle school, high school, meaning that there's not going to be any strikes. There's not going to be any crazy eye gouge, fish hooks, nothing like that. It's truly no striking, wrestling, grappling. And there's just different positions that you can get really good at. A lot of what jiu-jitsu specializes is like fighting from the ground. So two people are literally on the ground. How do I get somebody in a bad position to be able to choke them, put them in a shoulder lock, elbow lock, wrist lock, knee bar, ankle lock, all those things. So that's what it's going to look like. For most people who watch a jiu-jitsu match, they're just going to see two guys kind of rolling around. Definitely way more than that. But for the untrained eye, it's going to just kind of be like, oh. And you can kind of hear those things if you ever go to out in public and watch UFC fight, and the fights gets taken to the ground. Everyone's just like, stand them up. But they don't really understand the intricacies of what the heck is going on down there. So it's cool. But I would say the closest thing is wrestling. But you can go on your back and you're trying to submit people.
Yeah. So I think the hardest part for people to understand who haven't done grappling or haven't performed that art before, it's really a kinetic chess, right? So it's a movement, human-based chess match. For every movement, there's a counter. And if you expose yourself, so just very much like chess, if you expose your queen, they're taking it. And it's the same thing. But the difference is, to medicalize it a little bit, it's almost like if you can get access to that piece, the difference is now you're putting them in an orthopedic test where we're testing the limits of that joint or the integrity of that tissue, and you're putting as much force into that as you can to get them to say, I quit.
Yes, that's it, man. That is really it. And it's just the minds that are attacking jiu-jitsu right now and how they're breaking it down, and they're using the anatomy of like, oh, and this is this is where to torque it, where the joint will blow out and give out. It's like, whoo, it's getting scary out there. It's getting deep.
That is the hard part. I remember when my brother, he was a state wrestler in Tennessee, but I remember his match getting to state and just watching the competition difference between like, oh yeah, they're wrestling, but David's team at Hendersonville High School at the time was pretty dominant. I mean, they had 3 or 4 that went to state. So every match really wasn't that good. I mean, they just pinned them so quick and it was just whatever. But by the time they got to the higher levels, like that last tournament before state, every one of them was a massive orthopedic test. And I'd been in practice for a couple years at that point, and I'm like, that's a rotator cuff test. Like, that's going to dislocate. Don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. And you just watch that kid just fight like crazy. And it's funny how when you get trained orthopedically and you're looking at these different tests, it's so funny because we're always looking at somebody that's not healthy, that's very injured, and we're then seeing those tests. Then you watch somebody that's very healthy, that's max effort, trying to prevent them from performing that or getting them into that injury position. It's a wild lens to look at it through when you've been trained like we've been trained. But when you've already been exposed to the sport on the front end, it's easy to not look at it like that as much. But absolutely, the commentary at some point is going to have to go there, right? It's just too black and white. I remember seeing that in 2010 was like, oh my gosh, they're all orthopedic tests, every single one.
Yeah. And it's funny because I got a few friends who've been in the game for a long time. I mean, these guys are veterans, but they're footlock people. And when you play with that fire of the footlock, it's like stuff changes. You get popped a lot. The ligaments start tearing and ripping. So I got some friends whose feet just hang. And it's like what normal orthopedic testing would be like, ooh, that's lockout, or ooh, that's at end range. It's like those people literally have been in the game so long. They've just gotten popped so many times. Their foot is pretty much already just hanging. So it's like, you could try to break it, but it's kind of already been snapped and popped 20 times. So go for it.
Yeah. So that's very interesting to get into the topic a little bit. What's very interesting, this is something we even see when we think about dancers that learn to get up on their toes so much, they actually lengthen that capsule of those ligaments, the parts that hold bone to bone that limit that range. They're pounding on it so much, especially ballet, where they can get in these extreme positions. But also this sport's training those extreme positions, right? And the body's going to adapt, whether that's an injury that's not letting them tolerate that more, or just over time adapting to that much stress. And you hit that stress strain curve is what we call it in healthcare. But when you are getting that tissue up, of course you're going to see that. And seeing those athletes come in to the clinic, that's something that we see. And to be able to feel that it's a whole different ballgame. You can tell they've trained it in some way. Same with dancers. When you do a couple of those tests on the ankle, you're like, well, that goes forever. And then the other way, you'll typically notice some kind of compensation. Maybe they can't go as far the other way or something like that. But
I love that because there's just different styles of jiu-jitsu, because my body type is not your body type. We have some of the most flexible people come to the gym, and their type of training and their type of moves that they're going to use are not the things that I'm going to use. Just like going back to Dan, like I said, he's a 6'7" heavyweight. So he would show some moves where he's like, all right, I'm going to pick this guy up, twirl him around, and then throw him over there. And I'm like, I can't do that. So it really is good. And that's where it's just this endless dive of learning jiu-jitsu according to your body and what you're good at and where you're mentally at, where your ligaments are at, because some people can be put in different positions and they're okay, but I might have to tap a little faster than somebody else. So that's just one of the things that keeps me coming back is just this endless pursuit of perfection and just being so individualized.
So let's talk about karate just for a minute, and then we'll circle back to these two, how they almost merge or where they clash and where the lines divide a little bit. So like I said, I started when I was 5 with karate, and the specific forms. So there's really 4 major forms of karate, and one of those is Wado-Ryu, and that's what my background is in. And so that was created by a name named Master Otsuka, and he was actually a chief instructor for jiu-jitsu, but Japanese jiu-jitsu. And so that's how he originated. He was chief instructor for them for a really long time, and then wanted to blend an art that had striking, so the punching, the kicking, with the locks, like you explained, and also throws. So basically take those 3, blend those together, but let's do it from a completely no harm basis, no weapons as well, art form. So as you go through karate, as you progress through the ranks or through the belts or check off achievements, so you go through the different belts, and each one, as you start off early, at least in the Savwara-ryu as we were instructed, it really starts out with a lot of choreography. And I think that's the best way to explain it. Here are the introductory katas or forms that you're going to perform. And each one is going to get progressively harder and teach you more skills that are going to be really important when we actually get into fighting scenarios. So they start out simple. They start adding more blocks that are important, more body weight shifts that are really important. So keep progressing through there. At the same time, you then start to practice choreographed fights. So as they're going to say punch low to the abdomen, all right, here's the type of block and body movement that's going to be crucial to do with that. Then here, if their body weight's coming at you with a kick here, here's how you want to step to not take that kick and also make the right counter. And so they're very choreographed through there. And then you get into the self-defense techniques. But again, the theme is they're very, very choreographed. And when we look at it from now looking at, say, UFC, or we look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus the blend of Jiu-Jitsu throws, locks, all those things that I was trained in, the direct line in the sand that I see personally is this is massively choreographed. And then I don't see near as much of that in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the reason I say that is because of the story that you just explained. When you moved around the country, going to undergrad, then going to grad school, then moving here to begin your clinical practice, all through those, you said, hey, you know what's awesome? Just dropping in at a studio or at a gym and let's go after it. Or let's meet up later and let's have a group of guys and then we can actually practice really well in our own setting and feel really good about it. That is dramatically different than my experience, because with my experience, if we were to do that, we would drop in and be like, so, okay, well, all right, let's do our forms here. And then we may or may not spar. And that's what we would call the fighting that was not choreographed. That'd be sparring. So that'd be our striking. It was all striking. There was none on the ground that we were trained in. It was all striking because that's where the tournaments led to. The tournaments were all point fighting, striking. But that's where I see the biggest difference. What are your thoughts?
Man, I love that. I think you hit the nail on the head. And that is something that I just don't think I verbalized very well. But I definitely think that's exactly what it is. It's like, hey, if someone throws this slow overhand, I'm going to be able to go like this, and then this, and then this, and this. Then it's like, whoa. That person's going to fight back, and that person's not a dummy, you know? So in jiu-jitsu, we definitely have certain things we work on with newcomers, and that mainly has to do with just being able to move their body on the ground. Because how good is somebody, if I said get down, be really good at moving your body on the ground. That's just something not a lot of people do. So we'll start them off on what we call shrimping, which is just being able to move your hips on the ground. And then we'll start in basic positions. But yeah, at no time. And, you know, usually it's like, hey, you get the first class, don't roll, which is what we would call sparring live, grappling, wrestling. But after that, it's like your second class, like as long as you don't roll with anybody mean, like people are going to take care of you and let you feel just that smother and that real, like, hey, yeah, like going to get smashed here for a while. So yeah, there's definitely none of that choreographed, which I think it's good to work on like how your body moves and techniques. But it's just like when it gets to a real fight, all it gets thrown out the window. It's Mike Tyson. It's like everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. And I think that it falls along with that line.
Your mom said that
oh God,
she's in a jet.
There she is. Yes.
No, it was awesome.
Shout out, Mom.
I instantly smiled. I didn't mean to smile just a second ago, but she was giving a shout out to my mom, saying she was doing the same thing. She would have rolled down there and let that kid have it.
Yeah. I got to say, my mom is the nicest person. She's literally an angel, but she always used to say, if you mess with my cubs, you're going to get Mama Bear. And she's right. She was right.
Yeah. Let's talk about going into a tournament type aspect. So again, I think when we talk about the two differences here, so the difference between Wado-Ryu and then the difference between Jiu-Jitsu, we talked about that difference of a big time choreography and then versus a not very choreographed, but a lot of physical interaction as far as competing. I think we then have to step back and say, there's going to be people that are way better suited for one versus the other. And picking what's right for you, I think, is a really huge decision between yourself, your family, what you gravitate to. The discipline side, I think, is very present with both. So you have to be disciplined to show up, to do the right thing. I bet there's a ton of crossover between the two as far as that's concerned, but how the actual workouts might look and how the actual training might look can be a heck of a lot different. But in martial arts that I came from, in the karate world, the pinnacle event that you're always training for, other than to do what's right for yourself and to be able to teach those below you and bring them up in the same family and community, was for karate tournaments. And that's where the competitive folks would come together. So from the competition side, our karate tournaments come back to, most of it is a choreographed competition. So it's who does the better form, right? Who makes it look the most like a fight? And then there's a weapons division where, because they'll have lots of different, as a karate tournament, remember I talked about there's 4 major branches, but those others may do a lot with weapons. So they may be there competing in that section. We were there for forms and we were there for point fighting. So for us, it was all about point sparring and striking. So we had headgear on, we had pads, but the difference was it was all about who could get to 5 points the quickest. That's all it was. So 2 points for kick to the head, 1 point for everything else, and first 1 to 5 wins. Full-ish contact, because you couldn't hit to the groin, but everywhere else it was full contact, full speed. But still, it's not about the stats of getting to the ground like mini fights do in real life. So the outcome maybe isn't the most towards self-defense, but it is a very healthy outlet to train discipline in somebody that needs that. I think, like myself, it did a really great job. But our fighting, it was intense, because that's all we had in the 90s and early 2000s that I was aware of. And we loved the living heck out of it. And I was extremely competitive there for a while and had an absolute blast until I got completely destroyed in one of my last tournaments that I ever competed in. I think it was the second to last tournament, and realized I've got to find something else, because I'm not going to pay the bills with this, that, and I need air conditioning and getting my butt kicked. I'm kind of soft. Yeah. But what is a tournament like for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
So let's just start with just kind of the outline. And the outline would be, so there's really 2 forms I think everyone should know about, and that there's gi jiu-jitsu, and gi would be wearing the traditional kimono, the full jacket, the belt, and the pants. So that's gi jiu-jitsu. And then there's no gi jiu-jitsu, which is usually like a rash guard, tight fitting shirt, and just some shorts. That's all that is. So you either kind of sign up for both, one or the other. But then in gi jiu-jitsu, you're going to get split up by your rank. So in jiu-jitsu, the ranking goes white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt. So whatever rank you are, you sign up for that, and then they'll split you up into weight categories. And then from there, it's kind of the same thing where it's like there's just local tournaments. So kind of like your brother, like, hey, around here there's local talent. And then there's kind of, you branched out, you go to your bigger cities, and then there's your big international. In no-gi, it gets a little weird, because they always don't respect the belt color. So they'll go by like years. So they'll go like novice, intermediate, advanced, and then broken up into weight categories. And then it's like, hey, you show up. Some local tournaments, you're lucky if you got 3 guys in your tournament or in your bracket. And then show up sometimes you got 15 people in your bracket. So that's kind of the layout of the tournaments in jiu-jitsu.
Gotcha. In the gi version, are the rules dramatically different? I know you lightly touched on that. Or for the most part, outsider looking in, would we notice a difference?
Probably as a novice person, just outside looking in, you would not notice. Yeah. But a big thing is just there's just a certain amount of leg locks. So the biggest one is there's no heel hooks, which people aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but there's just no heel hooks in the gi. But there's a whole game revolved around that gets taken away. And it's just a completely different style, because you get your whole body is a collar. Your whole body could be grabbed at that point in time because of the cloth. So it's just a way different game, and the rules are set up a little different.
Mitch just asked, if you're a healthy athlete and you're young, but you kind of move like a baby deer, right? So you're in some growth phases, you're growing up, but you just haven't figured it out yet. Where would you rank Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as an alternative or an option to help learn coordination as a young athlete as cross training?
That's a good question because as far as cross training goes, I think it's going to put you in so many variable positions during our warm ups. We're trying to do front rolls, back rolls. We're trying to do cartwheels. We're doing jumps. We're doing shooting, as like in wrestling, it's sprawling. So I really think it's one of the best cross training things because the movement variability is so stinking high. So if you could get in there at a young age and start to develop and see those different twists, the turns, that it's a really great platform for young athletes to get into. And just the fact that it's going to push you physically, it's going to develop you mentally bigger, that I would put jiu-jitsu up there, top of the list.
Yeah, I think with martial arts, as far as karate, I would say there's a lot there that really helps you control your body. I think the more difficult aspect is your time window, availability, and commitment. And I think that's probably studio dependent. I think it could be great for anybody, but I think the biggest piece is that the more we understand about the development of youth athleticism in those growth spurts, you have such a small window of time to really maximize that athlete's mobility. Meaning we've got some good data now that comes out of Titleist Performance Institute, where on certain growth cycles, that when we are growing the most inch height measurement per month, that there's a window when you're in that growth cycle where we want to really bomb and maximize your mobility. Because the more mobile we get you, it appears that really translates to a lifelong of better mobility. So the more that you can focus on that in those windows, the better. And that's where I jump to answering Mitch's question from the karate aspect is, yeah, you're going to focus on a little bit of that mobility. You are going to work on a lot of coordination and body awareness. I think as a overall practice through the lifespan, I think it's really great, but I think you really got to be committed from white belt to black belt from the karate side to really get the best value out of that. I don't think it works as supplemental, quick plug in, let's get what we can get out of it. I think medically what we can offer is dramatically faster in the clinic these days, or getting with a great FMS trained strength coach if you're not in pain, or having a great athletic trainer that's doing big triage for the whole team to find when you're in those windows. Those things are a little bit better at being able to meet that. But I think that's a hard answer because my passion is so much Wada-Ryu, and I love that, and I love what that did for me. It shaped who I am in every single way, and so much of where I'm at today is because of that. I think it's because of the whole long-term commitment through those phases, though.
Yeah. So this is a little off topic, just in your expertise, how does a parent find that window? Like, usually it is your mom, your dad that's going to sign you up for these martial arts, but how do they not miss that window? Because I know that is a case that we see a ton of here at Active Spine and Joint Center, is the kid that's like, oh, I grew 6 inches a year ago. Now I've lost all this mobility. And it was like, dang it, if we could have got a hold of you a year ago, that was when we could have knocked it out and you could have been better than ever. So as a parent who might be listening, how do they find that window and know that they're doing their kids right?
The website is growmetry.com if you want a paid solution to be able to track that and to tell you those windows. But it's as simple as measuring height month to month consistently. But now being a parent of a 3 and 5 year old female, it is extremely challenging at the younger ages to get them to do that. They are so hot and cold. Amlin the other day was like, measure me, measure me, measure me. So we took her measurement and she's just proud as can be that she hasn't really grown any, but she was super proud of it. And then little Ellie at 3 is like, oh, sister's doing it, I'm in. So she put on her shoes and now is doing it. And she's like, I'm taller. And Amlin is just ripping her like, you're cheating. You got shoes on, and just going at her. And it's wild. But being consistent with that, I think you've got to set a alarm at the beginning of the month and know that that's what we're going to do. We're just going to measure every single month, find those windows, and really now's when you can attack that mobility in those windows. And I think the hardest part is that's a massive cultural shift to do that and to seek wellness or health care as opposed to reactionary sickness care. And I think that's what's been really fun about having physicians on like Dr. Scott Jordan, like Dr. Don Lynn. When they were on, we got on that exact same topic. All of us can agree that what's really best for us is getting ahead of those things. But the society and the system that we're set up in is completely reactionary. So because of that, the parent really has to grab it by the horns and say, look, this is what we do. And then now we're going to be able to push forward with that. And that's where my wife and I started about 10 years ago. We started the beginnings of getting a nonprofit going for that type of screening in the schools. And I think that's really the answer. And one day we want to see that really flourish. But the reality is we've got to get to where movement is screened in the system, right? Yeah. That has to be part of it. In this COVID era, there's not a whole lot we can really do with that. That's not the right time or place. We have other bigger concerns as a society. But when we get to this next side of the new America 2.0, that's when we really need to be pushing for that, to see more of these movement screenings on the front end. Because like we talked about before, the insurance companies are even realizing by the time they get to paying, it's not that it's completely too late, but you missed your window to prevent that. And that's the issue, is that we really need to be thinking that way. But like Dr. Sullivan said when he was on, in our mind, we get a problem, now we got to solve it. That's human nature. Human nature isn't exactly the best thing for us, right? Human nature, like I talked about with Dr. Seaman, was, man, I really want to kill that whole plate of brownies right now. Like, that's human nature. That's what I want. But what's really the best is don't let temptation take. Don't sleep on that information. Don't sleep on just because we're not getting that accumulated disaster, the roof doesn't collapse tomorrow, or I'm not stiff and guarded forever tomorrow, that I won't be in the future because I'm not taking it proactive.
Love it. Love it. Great answer.
Take me through one tournament, one match.
Man, it just depends which one you want, you know? Do you want the one that goes really good, the one that goes really bad, the one that goes good and bad? I'll just start off by a little bit of just my personal history. And it's since I can literally remember in third grade flag football, getting so nervous before flag football games, third grade. How did I even know it was that important or it was that big a deal? But I remember literally throwing up. So competition has always been a really intriguing thing to me because it's something that I want to master. Because I go into the gym, I feel good, I can think through what I want to do. I'm nice, calm, cool, collected, all that fun stuff. And then I sign up for that tournament and all hell breaks loose. It's literally me just freaking out. I literally can't think for a week. And then I'm having to get there, trying different strategies to warm up my body, calm my mind, all that fun stuff. So competing has been really interesting. So definitely had my fair share of pukes after matches. I spoke on a little bit about you. I'll just, everybody can laugh at me for a second, but I remember this was when I was at college. I was training a lot, just gotten my blue belt. I was feeling nice and hot. I was like, man, I'm ready to go. I'm going to go up to this IBJJF tournament. So IBJJF in the world of jiu-jitsu is kind of one of the most popular tournaments. So you could pull off one of those tournaments, like, oh, you're a pretty big deal. Like, you're good. So I drive, I think it's 8 hours from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Dad picks me up. We go up to Chicago. That first round, I get there, a lot of lights, big stadium, it's going down. I'm literally one of the first matches out, so I don't get a good warm-up in. I had just taken some pre-workout, didn't really know exactly what I was doing. I go out, 5-minute match, get smashed pretty good. Nothing crazy, though. Instantly come off the mat, hurl right in a trash can right there. And then that just then I got another one, same kind of thing. Ooh, training some more. I'll get back at it. Ooh, my friends are going up to New York. So me and my friends, three of my training partners, hop in a car, 15 hours, drive all the way to New York. I'm like, this time I'm going to be ready. I get my warm-up on. I got my hoodie on, headphones. I'm serious. I'm foam rolling, sweating. Like, this is it. This is my time. I'm going to win this tournament. Step out on the mat. 3 minutes of me and this guy kind of just dancing around a little bit. 2 minutes to go. He double legs me. Kind of wiggle out. We stand back up.
Double leg mean?
So double leg means he's standing in front of me. He drops kind of below, grabs my legs, takes me to the ground.
So he basically just lassos your ankles.
Yeah, but more football tackle. Football tackle. Good form football tackle to the ground. Nothing really happens. I stand up. Another minute goes by. Match over. He wins 2-0 because you get awarded points for takedown. So just drove 15 hours. Mentally, I was there. I was ready to do it. And that one crushed me pretty hard. But then I've also had my fair shares of tournament wins, local tournaments. But, give credit where it's due. They did get a couple wins. And those are the times I was able to stay cool, calm, collected, do what I needed to do, and get the win. So I love competing, going to continue to compete. It's a little harder now being in clinical practice, training maybe 2 days a week. So I never want to use that excuse when I go out to compete, but
there's a
I've
difference.
been trying to do it.
Yeah, there's a difference. But those wins feel so much better, right? When do. Because you're now getting 100% focused practice and competition, as opposed to where you would take it for granted before, where you may give 70% at those other workouts, but you had a whole lot more volume. Now you're giving 100% because you got to enjoy that when you've got it.
Yes. I love that point because I told my training partners that the other day. I was like, me being able to train a couple days a week, I feel like it makes me sharper. Because like you said, I'm thinking about it, the drive over there, I'm thinking about what I need to get done. As soon as I step on the mats, there's not a second I don't take for granted. I'm working hard, putting in the time, and then up until they're like, dude, all right, it's time to leave, I'm sitting there working hard. And then afterwards, it's on my mind until the next time. So it is a little bit of a gift and a curse, and just making what I can of it, loving clinic life here, and then when I can get in and training hard. So it's fun.
Yeah. I do want to try to get Dr. Lindemann on the show. He is one of the experts in exactly what you're talking about, that I get started in the workout and or before the competition, it doesn't matter if it's flag football or whatever, and your body goes so sympathetic. Just everything is just freaking out, sweating. And part of that we know is that we're getting the brain's getting primed, trying to get more oxygen, trying to get more blood flow to be ready and be very alert. But I think it would be nice to get him on the show sometime. So
tell my brain that, Dr. Hulme. Just tell my brain that. Just, hey, dude, it's just my blood. Just my brain wants some oxygen. Just calm down.
Subconscious system is different, man. So let's talk about the same exact thing. There's an article that was published about maybe 4 years ago, and it was talking about there is a group of individuals. Youth ADHD has been a huge problem. This is something that we've heard about for a long time. There was a time period where I just remember hearing parents talk about it, saying, oh, that's not real, or, oh, my kid is so severe. And you just remember hearing stigmas about it. But the reality of the situation is that there's very clear-cut guidelines for someone that suffers for ADHD. And with those individuals, the big thing that we know is that their prefrontal cortex, not to get too nerdy, but just there's an area in the brain that's really big on our movement and our attention. And in that part of the brain, we really want there to be very minimal noise, meaning we don't want it to be, if we're looking at that on a special test, we don't want to see that it's just lighting up lots of stimulus when nothing's happening. We want them to be able to stay calm, right? But what we've now started to see over the last several years is that exercise, we know for sure that there's no real debate that increases our norepinephrine and our dopamine levels in the brain, right? So we get these chemicals released when we're just active and exercise. The cool thing is that we know norepinephrine increases that signal quality that happens in that area of the brain of our movements and our coordination, and then the dopamine decreases that extra noise. So almost that clarity. So a kid with ADHD, if they get worked really hard with intense exercise, guess what happens? They get that moment of that clarity. They feel that fidgety or that just uncontrolled discomfort alleviate. So you can start to self-treat that. And I think for a long time, early on, there was this message, and I remember this in the late 90s. It was, oh, your kid has ADHD, get them in karate. And that was the phrase that I heard forever. But I remember working with kids that had ADD or ADHD, and there were ones that were just impossible to work with. And there were others that once we got focused, they were in and they could tackle it, and they were always the best kids after class. So I think, again, this is all hypothesis and we don't have a ton of published literature on this, but we have some. But a more intense martial art, like a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you are grappling from a young age, where you are exerting more energy, there may be a line where certain ones can do better. They can overcome if they just try really hard, think really hard, and practice that discipline and get a little bit better. So maybe that early spectrum ADD that they can do really well with more of a Wado-Ryu style martial art or karate. But those that need more intense, maybe need to have a studio that maybe it is Wado-Ryu, but maybe they're really focused on the physical, or like that class you talked about where y'all started out with all kinds of different workouts, cross training before you even got to your technique, but that would really focus a lot of kids. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm 100% behind that, because the hard part too is, though, you can there's a spectrum of everything, just like there's good chiropractic physicians, there's bad martial arts schools. But I really think if you have a good mentor there to be able to kind of be coached to those people, like, hey, no, you got to focus, stand here. And then just how the classes ran. I've seen plenty of people drop out in jiu-jitsu just from the warm-up. And I know they're pushing the kids class just the same way. It's like, hey, that's an intense 15, 20-minute warm-up. And it's like, you got to go. Get it pumping. Then after that, it's like, hey, positional drilling, you're moving more. And then at the end, they always conclude it with like a sparring round. I don't know if this is maybe appropriate, but it's my favorite days with my dog is when she gets wiped out and pooped at doggy daycare. And it's like, for that kid to be able to go for an hour, 60 minutes, it's like, man, that's going to be a better behaving kid if he just got pooped at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class. So I think it's 100% advocate anybody to get their kid in some martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. And we know as society has progressed, we've gotten dramatically more sedentary. They've pulled PE out of schools. So by taking it as a parent and being able to say, look, we're going to schedule that time, because that's where we're at anyway, right? Kids now, it's all scheduled play anyway. I mean, we're in Hendersonville, Tennessee, my top city on the planet to be. And I love how I feel every day I'm in Hendersonville. But the difference is, if we go back 30 years, I know that story that I said at the beginning, if there's a new mom or new dad listening, they're like, you rode home 4 houses by yourself when you were 5. It's like, man, in Hendersonville 30 years ago, of course we did. When I was 6, it was a no-brainer that we were going to ride a quarter mile to school on our bike with my cousin that was in 2nd grade and my other cousin that was, in kindergarten. So when we moved up a grade, she came with us. Of course we did. Like, we'd pass.
No cell phone either.
Yeah, no cell phone. We'd pass one car, all the way there. And it was like, absolutely, we do that. And we would go get lost in the woods for 2-3 hours at a time. We hit each other with different things, bike jump off of silly things. I mean, that's literally what we did. We built our own ramps and whatever. And really now, the closer you are to a big city, the less that's a thing. And, we're right next to Nashville. So that's what it is here now. So if your kid does athletics, it's all scheduled. It's soccer on Saturday. You got maybe 1 or 2 practices a week, but it's really now up to the parents to initiate that. And that's the culture we're used to. But I think the balance that's really difficult is, how do we get them enough physical activity? And we're not realizing we're really not getting anywhere near what a kid's stimulation really needs for them to learn their best and to be their best.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mean, they're setting 8 hours at school. Recess seems like it keeps getting cut down. Like you said, the gym class is getting cut down. So it's like, you have these kids, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with being a little on that spectrum of ADHD. I just, people are made a certain way, shifted higher gears with others. But if it's like, there's literally no outlet for them to get it out, it's like, yeah, these kids are going to have a little behavioral issues. It's just not going to come out the way you want it to. But finding, obviously my bias is going to be jiu-jitsu, but get them into something. And it really does kind of fall back on the parents, because it is scheduled, to just go and try. And it's like, hey, you can walk in any martial arts school, and there's probably going to be, a week trial or whatever it is. Give it a couple tries, and, don't feel bad to say like, hey, this isn't my fit. Let me go try something else, and just keep playing around. I would say that is the biggest thing. Don't give up on one. There's plenty of options out there to get your kids into.
Yeah. The kids part is always the tough subject, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because that's where we care about so much, doing the best that we possibly can. It is our future. It's so important. And having these options, I remember when I was little, I remember people talking to my mom saying, "Oh, aren't you worried they're going to get hurt?" And I think those are some of the things that'll be our worries and our fears. But I think that's where taking the outreach, getting with those instructors, meeting them, learning that it is way different from an adult going 10 out of 10 on each other versus what an introductory kid's going to do. Even though you're pushing them, it's still completely different. And that it's so important for them to have that outlet of some sort that I think is key. Ethan, brother, I think we're about to wrap this up. Any last statements? Any last questions? I'm going to scroll up real quick and see if I missed anything.
Yeah, check out the comment section. I want to give a shout out to Alan. Alan's here every week. He's got a drink. It's usually something good. He's participating in the comments. So shout out to Alan Bickmer. Great guy. Great guy.
Ooh, Miss Bombaderi jumped in. She was one of my instructors forever. So that's really cool that she joined in on the show tonight a little bit. And big shout out to Leslie Cheeseman and Rebecca. She's got her 2nd degree black belt. And I think she was at class tonight. That's why she couldn't make it watch the show, but hopefully she gets to see that. But man, I really appreciate you coming on. This was a blast.
Thank you.
I've got a million more topics that I want to go with you, but I'm going to finish this off. I didn't think I was going to finish this. Early on, I hated the first sip, liked the second. Third, I liked the cinnamon. Then I just got kind of numb, and now I think I'm going to finish it.
It didn't get as much hate as what was the one that you trashed this drink. Which one was it?
Had to be the lemon drop.
The lemon drop, man. You were on that the whole show. You were like,
no way.
Yeah.
I can tell you for sure I will never have another lemon drop.
The Coghill White Russian. Let's go for the win.
All right, brother. Thanks so much.
All right.
Have a great night.
Dr. Hulme.